What do you think needs to happen out there in terms of building more intellectual capital infrastructure in terms of sort of a really diverse academic community that can take these issues and run with them over time?
Yeah, well, I've been struck with, I think I have really just one answer to that question. I have been struck with how faculty life has shifted over the past decade, where I think it used to be that scholars had a little more time to think and a little more bandwidth to think together. And when I talk to the kind of up and coming scholars now, they're just slammed with committees and students and talks and social media and like the number of things pulling. I think one of the big problems is that scholars are siloed. And that workload issue contributes to the siloing because there's just not the bandwidth to have the same kinds of intellectual exchange and conversations that folks would want to have. And siloing is part for the course in the way universities operate. But siloing by discipline, by generation, by department, by school, that kind of siloing doesn't facilitate working on or solving the big problems of our society. Because you really need a sociologist, a psychologist, an economist, an historian. Like you need all of the perspectives to think about what might be a productive direction forward. So I think that one big thing we've been thinking about and trying to work on is how do you support the structures for collaborative knowledge creation? Like that's not just fund the smartest of the people, right? Because even the smartest of us, or the most accomplished of us, or the most prolific of us on our own can't do what needs to be done right now.
I struggle mightily with the incentives all run toward working in isolation of others.
Yeah.
And the kinds of problems that I've always been interested in working on are the ones you can't work on alone.
Right.
And
which are the most important ones. And that's the wonderful opportunity about Spencer, is because those incentive structures you speak to, we can work on that. That's something we can work on. Yeah. And I actually think there are many university leaders, deans, provosts, presidents, who are also very interested right now in cultivating the context by which scholars can work deeply on the big problems of our society.
Well, I would simply make this question of collaboration you've posed, I'd try to complicate it further by arguing that, the ability to conceive of the problems and collaborate with the field, with practitioners and policymakers, is another imperative, something else that the moment requires. Call it use-inspired research. And I think that we're well positioned to help make some of these connections and these kinds of partnerships between the research community and the world of practice.
There was a moment that I think we both witnessed that speaks to that point that you're making about the complexity of the relationship between scholars and practitioners, and I think also speaks to how in this moment we have to broaden what we view as the work of scholars and scholarship. And it was a moment in the convening when we had been, I think we did a lot of work to try to make sure that we gave equal voice, that we didn't overprivilege the researchers, that we didn't set up a dynamic where it was researchers on high, please tell us all what we should be doing. And so the moment I'm speaking of was one of the superintendents, I don't remember which one, was incredibly poignant and articulate about conveying that this isn't a knowledge issue. He said, we know what we need to be doing. We know what our families and communities need to engage and to learn. He called it out as a political issue, as an issue of what he had the funding streams to do, what he had the political support within the district and more broadly to do, and actually asked for the scholars to dig in differently. I think the word he used was cover. It's like we don't necessarily need your advice. We'll take your advice and we value it, but what we need from you is cover.
I think he meant a couple of things.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I think he meant was we need you to appreciate the complexity
Yeah.
within which we're working.
Mm-hmm.
The things that we do and don't control, the influence we do and don't have, and how hard earned and yet how fragile that influence can in fact be. And so it's not helpful to parachute in
Mm-hmm.
and making intellectual critiques, of kind of
Right.
that's one thing I think he meant
Yes.
by cover, right?
Yeah.
Right. And the other thing I think he meant was, given the regard in which you are held
Mm-hmm.
in certain quarters,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, you know, being able to actually embrace and support or connect the dots between, maybe
Right.
said this way, the things we think we know in research and the actions we are trying to take in real time on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
is useful cover,
Yeah.
right?
Our research training doesn't prepare us to build things. It prepares us to critique things. But if you ask scholars to create something, that's much harder to do than that deconstruction.
Together, we can embrace more of the real complexity around the things that we care about. And I don't doubt the passion. I think the passion is sincere. But I hope we're much more likely, to an earlier point you made, to make progress if we work through it together
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
than if we pursue a competition of ideas
Right.
about how to get there. So I'm cautiously optimistic that that's a path that we might actually get on.
That makes me very, very optimistic, and to know that there are folks like you and others who are working in the philanthropic sector, in higher ed, as scholars. I mean, these young scholars make me amazingly optimistic. People are doing really fabulous work in really bold and unapologetic ways.